Roman history, spanning more than a millennium, was shaped not only by the Senate and the legions, but also by emperors who held absolute power in their hands. From the founder who transformed a republic into an empire, to wise rulers who ushered in the Pax Romana, and to controversial figures who witnessed the fracturing of the ancient world, each left a profound mark on the flow of history. In this story, we explore 10 of the most famous Roman emperors, from the first ruler to the visionaries of late antiquity, to better understand the power, intellect, and tragedies hidden behind the throne. Watch until the end to see how a single city grew to encompass the world. Don't forget to subscribe to join us on future historical journeys. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Augustus was the founder of the Roman Empire and one of the most powerful and calculating figures of antiquity. Born into a wealthy plebeian family, but adopted posthumously by his great-uncle Julius Caesar, he rose from the chaos of the civil wars that plagued the late Republic. Originally known as Octavian, he formed the Second Triumvirate with Mark Antony and Lepidus to avenge Caesar's death. However, ambition soon turned allies into enemies. His decisive naval victory at Actium in 31 BC against Antony and Cleopatra allowed him to unify the fractured Roman world and end decades of internal bloodshed. Unlike the dictators before him, Augustus did not flaunt absolute power. Instead, he craftily maintained the illusion of the Republic while consolidating all real authority, military, tribunian, and financial, into his own hands. In 27 BC, the Senate granted him the title Augustus, marking the true beginning of the imperial age. He established the Praetorian Guard, reformed the taxation system, and annexed vast territories, including Egypt and northern Spain, securing the empire's borders. His reign initiated the Pax Romana, a long period of relative peace and stability across the Mediterranean world. However, his military record was not with blemish. The catastrophic Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, where 3 Roman legions under Publius Quintilius Varus were ambushed and annihilated by Germanic tribes, marked a turning point in Roman history. This defeat, occurring in the dense forests and marshes of Germania, halted Roman expansion across the Rhine and forced a permanent shift to a defensive strategy on the northern frontier. It is said that for months after the disaster, Augustus would beat his head against a door, crying, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." Domestically, he embarked on massive construction projects, famously boasting that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. He sponsored poets like Virgil and Horace, using culture to legitimize his new regime. Yet, his personal life was marred by tragedy and the difficulty of finding a successor, forcing him to adopt his stepson Tiberius. He died in 14 AD, leaving the image of a shrewd architect of empire who built a system that would endure for centuries. Tiberius was the second Roman emperor and a figure of immense military capability shadowed by deep personal resentment. Born into the ancient Claudian lineage, he was a reluctant ruler, stepping into the role only after the deaths of Augustus's preferred heirs. Before ascending the throne, Tiberius was Rome's greatest generals, conquering Pannonia, Dalmatia, and Raetia, and securing the northern frontier along the Rhine. His military prowess laid the defensive groundwork for the empire's safety. Ascending the throne in 14 AD, he initially attempted to rule in cooperation with the Senate, much like his predecessor. However, he lacked Augustus's charisma and political tact. As the years passed, his reign grew increasingly dark. He became suspicious of the aristocracy and relied heavily on Sejanus, the ambitious prefect of the Praetorian Guard, to manage Rome. Sejanus, whose father Strabo had also been prefect, consolidated his power by centralizing the guard into a single garrison in Rome and eliminating political rivals, including the emperor's own son Drusus. By 26 AD, Tiberius had retreated to the island of Capri, leaving Sejanus as the effective ruler of Rome. From this isolation, Tiberius ruled via letters, while treason trials, majestas, surged in Rome, leading to the execution of many senators and rivals. The relationship between the emperor and his prefect eventually fractured. In 31 AD, amidst suspicions of a conspiracy to seize the throne, Tiberius engineered Sejanus's arrest and execution, which was followed by a brutal purge of Sejanus's followers. His later years were characterized by a grim, purge-heavy administration that spread fear across the realm. He curtailed the people's assemblies and reduced public games, earning the hatred of the Roman populace. Despite his unpopularity, he left the imperial treasury with nearly 3 billion sesterces, proving to be a fiscally responsible, if unloved, administrator. He died in 37 AD, remembered not as a conqueror, but as a gloomy tyrant who exposed the dangers of absolute power when held by the unwilling and the paranoid. Caligula, whose nickname means Little Boot from his childhood days in military camps, is remembered as the archetype of the mad emperor. The son of the beloved general Germanicus, he ascended the throne in 37 AD amid a wave of optimism. The people and the Senate welcomed him as a breath of fresh air after the dour years of Tiberius. In his first few months, he recalled exiles, burned records of treason trials, and threw lavish spectacles to win the public's favor. However, following a severe illness just months into his reign, his behavior shifted radically. While ancient sources often attribute this to insanity, modern interpretations suggest his actions may have been calculated displays of absolute power meant to humiliate the Senate. One of the most famous anecdotes involves his War on the Sea. Around 40 AD, Caligula marched his legions to the coast of Gaul and ordered them to collect shells, which he claimed were spoils of the ocean. While traditionally viewed as madness, some historians argue this was a form of military punishment for a mutinous legion or a satirical mockery of the triumph system, reminding the elite that honor came from his will alone, not military merit. His spending was unchecked. He exhausted the vast treasury left by Tiberius on extravagant building projects, including a floating bridge across the Bay of Baiae and 2 massive pleasure barges at Lake Nemi. He humiliated the Senate, famously joking about making his horse, Incitatus, a consul to mock the political establishment. His insistence on being worshipped as a living god further alienated the Roman elite, as he reportedly planned to place a statue of himself in the Temple of Jerusalem, a move that nearly sparked a revolt in Judea. His cruelty and unpredictability terrified the court. He was known to order executions on a whim and seized the wives of leading senators during dinner parties. This reign of terror could not last. In 41 AD, he was assassinated by officers of the Praetorian Guard, led by Cassius Chaerea, in a conspiracy involving the Senate. He became the first emperor to be killed by his own protectors, dying at the young age of 28 and leaving a legacy of excess that highlighted the fragility of the imperial succession.
Nero was the last emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, a figure whose reign began with promise but ended in chaos and civil war. Ascending the throne in 54 AD at just 16 years old, his early rule was guided by his tutor, the philosopher Seneca, and the prefect Burrus. During these golden years, the administration was competent, reforms were enacted, and the frontiers were stable. However, as Nero matured, he chafed under their guidance and began to assert his own artistic and autocratic impulses, eventually forcing Seneca to commit suicide. The turning point of his reign came in 65 AD with the Pisonian conspiracy, a plot by senators and equestrians to assassinate him and replace him with the nobleman Gaius Calpurnius Piso. The conspiracy, driven by discontent with Nero's despotism, failed when a freedman named Milicus exposed the plot after observing his master sharpening a dagger. The aftermath was bloody. Nero ordered a wave of executions and forced suicides, decimating the Roman aristocracy and solidifying his reputation as a tyrant.
He is perhaps best known for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. While the legend that he fiddled while Rome burned is likely apocryphal, he did use the devastation to clear land for his massive golden house, Domus Aurea, a palace complex of staggering opulence in the city center. To deflect blame for the fire, he instigated the first major persecution of Christians, using them as scapegoats. His passion lay not in governance but in the arts. He scandalized the Roman elite by performing publicly as an actor, musician, and charioteer, blurring the lines between emperor and entertainer. His extravagance bankrupted the state, leading to heavy taxation and the confiscation of wealthy citizens' property. Rebellions eventually erupted in Gaul and Spain, led by governors who had lost faith in his leadership. Abandoned by the Praetorian Guard and declared a public enemy by the Senate, he fled Rome. He committed suicide in 68 AD, reportedly exclaiming, "What an artist dies in me." His death plunged Rome into the year of the 4 emperors, ending the first imperial dynasty.
Vespasian was the founder of the Flavian dynasty, and the pragmatic ruler who restored order to Rome after the chaos of Nero's fall. Born into a modest equestrian family rather than the high aristocracy, he rose through the ranks via military competence, famously commanding a legion during the invasion of Britain. He was serving as the general suppressing the Great Jewish Revolt when the empire collapsed into civil war in 69 AD. Emerging as the victor from the year of the four emperors, he entered Rome not as a god, but as a stabilizer. His authority was formalized through the Lex de Imperio Vespasiani, a law that legally conferred specific powers upon him, effectively institutionalizing the privileges that previous emperors had held by custom or force. This document, inscribed on bronze tablets, stands as the only surviving example of an official act conferring imperial powers, confirming his control over the political, administrative, and religious life of the empire. It signaled a shift from the veiled autocracy of Augustus to a more openly defined imperial office.
As emperor, Vespasian focused on financial rehabilitation and restoring discipline. He raised taxes and famously declared, "Money does not stink, pecunia non olet," when criticized for taxing public urinals, underscoring his practical approach to governance. He rebuilt the capital, which had been ravaged by fire and war, dismantling Nero's Golden House to build public works, most notably beginning the construction of the Flavian Amphitheater, better known today as the Colosseum, a symbol of giving the city back to the people. His reign was characterized by a return to traditional Roman values and military discipline. He expanded the empire's borders in Britain and Germany and consolidated control in the East. Unlike the paranoid emperors before him, he cultivated a good relationship with the Senate and was known for his wit and lack of pretension. He died of natural causes in 79 AD, a rarity for emperors of that century, famously joking on his deathbed, "Dear me, I think I am becoming a god." He left a stabilized empire and a solvent treasury to his son Titus.
Trajan is often regarded as Rome's greatest soldier emperor and presided over the empire at its maximum territorial extent. Born in Hispania, modern Spain, he was the first emperor of non-Italian origin, signaling a shift toward a more inclusive empire. Adopted by the elderly Emperor Nerva, Trajan ascended the throne in 98 AD with the full support of the military. His reign is a defining chapter of the Five Good Emperors era, characterized by cooperation with the Senate and extensive public welfare programs. His administration offers us one of the clearest windows into Roman governance through his correspondence with Pliny the Younger, the governor of Bithynia. These letters reveal an emperor who was hands-on and pragmatic, advising on everything from public works to the treatment of Christians. When Pliny asked how to handle Christians who refused to worship the emperor, Trajan established a precedent of relative leniency for the time. They were not to be hunted down, and anonymous accusations were to be ignored, though those who openly refused to recant were still punished.
His most enduring mark lay in his aggressive military campaigns. He conquered Dacia, modern Romania, in two distinct wars, seizing its rich gold mines which fueled a massive building program in Rome, including Trajan's Forum and the famous Trajan's Column. He then turned east, launching a massive campaign against the Parthian Empire, capturing their capital Ctesiphon and annexing Armenia and Mesopotamia, extending Roman rule to the Persian Gulf. Domestically, he implemented the Alimenta,
a welfare program that provided funds for the care and education of poor children in Italy. He was known for his justice and accessibility, earning the title Optimus Princeps, best ruler, from the Senate. Under his rule, roads, bridges, and aqueducts were constructed across the empire, enhancing trade and communication. He died in 117 AD while returning from his eastern campaigns, leaving the image of a conquering hero whose name would be used in the blessing of future emperors. May you be luckier than Augustus and better than Trajan.
Hadrian, Trajan's successor, was a complex, intellectual ruler who shifted Rome's focus from expansion to consolidation. Ascending the throne in 117 AD, he realized that the empire had become overextended. He made the controversial but strategic decision to abandon Trajan's conquests in Mesopotamia, judging them indefensible, and settled the borders on the Euphrates, Rhine, and Danube. His reign marked a turning point toward defensive imperialism. He spent more than half of his reign traveling the provinces, inspecting legions, and overseeing the construction of defenses, most famously Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain, which marked the limit of the civilized world. A profound admirer of Greek culture, a Philhellene, he sought to unify the empire through culture and architecture. He rebuilt the Pantheon in Rome, creating the magnificent dome that stands to this day, and constructed his vast villa at Tivoli, which served as a microcosm of the empire's architectural wonders. His personal life was deeply impacted by his relationship with Antinous, a young Greek man who accompanied him on his travels. When Antinous drowned in the Nile in 130 AD, Hadrian was consumed by grief and took the unprecedented step of deifying him. He founded the city of Antinopolis near the site of his death and established a cult that spread throughout the empire, making Antinous one of the most enduring figures of Roman religious history. However, his rule had a darker side. His attempt to ban Jewish practices and rebuild Jerusalem as a Roman colony named Aelia Capitolina sparked the Bar Kokhba revolt, which he suppressed with brutal efficiency, devastating Judea. He was also an administrator who codified Roman law and professionalized the bureaucracy. He died in 138 AD, remembered not as a conqueror, but as the great traveler and builder who defined the physical and cultural shape of the empire.
Marcus Aurelius is remembered as the philosopher king, the last of the 5 good emperors whose reign embodied the Stoic ideal of duty. Ascending the throne in 161 AD, he ruled initially with his adoptive brother Lucius Verus. Unlike the peaceful eras of his predecessors, his reign was besieged by constant warfare and the first great pandemic, the Antonine Plague, which devastated the empire's population and economy. His reign was dominated by the Marcomannic Wars, 166 to 180 AD, a series of grueling conflicts against Germanic tribes like the Marcomanni and Quadi, who breached the Danube frontier. These wars forced Rome to adopt a defensive posture and highlighted the growing vulnerability of the northern borders. Despite the prolonged conflict, Marcus Aurelius successfully repelled the invasions, though he was forced to abandon plans to annex new territories across the Danube.
It was in these military camps, surrounded by death and cold,
that he wrote his famous Meditations, a personal journal of Stoic philosophy focused on service, duty, and the transience of life. He did not seek war, but he prosecuted it with relentless energy to protect the realm, balancing military necessity with ethical reflection. He famously sold off imperial palace treasures to pay off war debts rather than raise taxes on the citizenry, embodying his philosophy of placing the state above personal comfort. He attempted to rule with justice and wisdom, promoting capable officials and respecting the Senate. However, his decision to name his biological son, Commodus, as his successor, breaking the tradition of adopting the most capable man, is often cited as the fatal error that ended the Pax Romana. He died in 180 AD at a military post in Vindobona, Vienna, leaving a legacy of intellectual brilliance amidst the gathering storm of imperial decline. Diocletian was the reforming emperor who pulled Rome back from the brink of total collapse during the crisis of the 3rd century. Born into a low-status family in Dalmatia, he rose through the military ranks to seize the throne in 284 AD. The empire he inherited was fractured by civil war, plague, and invasion. He realized that the empire was too vast for one man to rule alone, and fundamentally reorganized the imperial structure. He established the tetrarchy, or rule of 4, dividing the empire into east and west, each ruled by a senior emperor, Augustus, and a junior successor, Caesar. This system was designed to ensure stable succession and better local defense. He moved the capital away from Rome to strategic cities closer to the frontiers, like Nicomedia and Milan, reducing the Senate's power to that of a municipal council.
Economically, he attempted to halt runaway inflation with the Edict on Maximum Prices in 301 AD, an ambitious intervention that set price ceilings for over 900 goods and wages for 130 different types of labor. The edict blamed inflation on the greed of merchants and threatened death for those who violated the price caps. However, the policy largely failed. Goods disappeared from the legal markets as merchants refused to sell at a loss, leading to a booming black market and eventual abandonment of the law. Diocletian is also known for the Great Persecution, the last and most severe attempt to purge Christianity from the empire to restore traditional Roman religious unity. In a rare move for an emperor, he voluntarily abdicated in 305 AD to retire to his palace in Split, modern Croatia. When asked to return to power during later political turmoil, he famously replied that if they could see the fine cabbages he had planted with his own hands, they would not ask him to sacrifice his peace for power. He died in 311 AD, having saved the empire from dissolution, but transforming it into a rigid, autocratic state.
Constantine the Great was the pivotal figure who bridged the ancient and medieval worlds, known for Christianizing the empire and shifting its center of gravity to the east. Rising from the tetrarchy system, he fought a series of civil wars to become the sole ruler. his victory at the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, where he famously fought under the sign of the Chi Rho, a Christian symbol, marked the turning point for religious history in the West. As emperor, he issued the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, granting religious tolerance to Christians and effectively ending centuries of persecution. He presided over the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, unifying Christian doctrine and intertwining the church with the imperial state. Strategically, he realized Rome was no longer a viable capital and founded a new Rome at the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople. This city would serve as the heart of the Eastern Roman, Byzantium, Empire for another 1,000 years.
His reign was also marked by a dark and mysterious family tragedy in 326 AD. He ordered the execution of his eldest son, Crispus, and shortly thereafter, his wife, Fausta. Ancient sources like Zosimus suggest Fausta may have accused Crispus of sexual misconduct or treason, leading to his death, and was subsequently executed when the truth, or her own adultery, was discovered. The method of Fausta's death, reportedly in an overheated bath, remains a subject of grim fascination and scholarly debate. He continued Diocletian's reforms, strengthening the central bureaucracy and the mobile field army. He introduced the solidus, a gold coin that became the standard currency for centuries. He died in 337 AD, baptized on his deathbed, leaving the image of a visionary who fundamentally altered the culture and geography of the Roman world, setting the stage for the Middle Ages.